Obviously, to get one game underneath our belt is big, and for that to be a win is even better. That first game is there's always some anxieties for coaches because you're still have some questions about how some of your young players are going to perform, if they're going to handle the pressures of being a Division I-A player and being out in front of that crowd and all those other things. And there's obviously an awful lot of lead up to a first ball game. And now we get back into a flow, and so I'm excited about how some of those young players played. Also a little bit reticent about sticking a few back in the ball game based off how they played, although I know that they will play a little bit better this next week in relation to them just being more calmed down. And we did play an awful lot of players in that ball game, which I was excited about. That was kind of one of the things that we set out to do to begin with. Excited the fact that obviously we beat a Power 5 school, and I think there were 20 of those matchups somewhere in that neighborhood. Power 5 versus the Group of 5 this past weekend. I think there were 3 of us that won against a Power 5 school. And I think if memory serves me correctly, I think we were the only one that had that game at home. And so that was really big in relation to trying to get a Power 5 conference school at our place. And so I think it was a win-win for us. And now we're anxious to move on to an Idaho team that obviously we don't really know that much about. It's very similar to what we played, I think, this last week in relation to the fact that you've got a staff that's been there for a year. They're obviously going to be better just because the players understand the systems better. But with the influx of junior college players and junior college players that I'm sure fit their systems better, then I'm sure we're going to see some changes structurally on offense and defense. And obviously with the game not being played against the University of Florida, I shouldn't say that. I guess they got one snap in. And I'm glad it turned it on. We don't have a lot of body of work to be able to understand a little bit about kind of what goes on, and obviously that impacts us. It impacted us against Wake Forest. They came out with some new things. I thought our players did a phenomenal job along with the staff in terms of making halftime adjustments, and that was really, really good to see. And in this ball game, obviously, because of not having a body of work again to be able to build off of, then I'm sure we're going to have to do a great job in the first half in relation to handling all the necessary adjustments, because we know that we are going to see some different things and some new things. So, questions?
So is it a real disadvantage, the fact that they didn't play?
Well, I think that there's it's always much easier, and especially I think in the situation that they're in currently, because of the number of junior college players that are out there, that it's more difficult whenever you don't know what they're going to do. And so it's always easier to be able to see your opponent on video. Now, I also recognize, too, that they haven't gone through some of the first game things. They don't know as much about their football team as we do. And so, and ours was very telling. And that's what a first game does for you. It tells you who you need to be playing and who you don't need to be playing and who needs to be growing up. And I think we learned an awful lot about our team. They learned a lot about themselves. And so we've got that behind us. And so hopefully some of those first game things that tend to kind of plague you a little bit, then, it's you're not as concerned about it in the next one. But it was, I think, the Wake Forest game was an opportunity for us to grow up, and I appreciate that opportunity to grow up. I'd rather be in our shoes right now in relation to, even though we don't know what they're going to do, having played a first game, than being the other way, because we've certainly over the last 4 years, we've had 2 years where our open date was basically at the start of the season, and so everybody else had played before us, and that there's that disadvantage. I assure you.
You talked about learning some things about your team. Was there any surprises in that first game, or was it more so, I think I'm going to learn this about the players, and it ended up coming to fruition?
Yeah, there's a good fruition word. Yes, I think that there are some surprises. Now, I think you're right in the sense that we have an idea going in, and so now you just need to see it one way or the other. You've got an idea about whether they're going to have any mental errors or whether they're going to play at a really, really high level. And I think that we, again, I think we were able to find that out. I think the other thing that happened, and this tends to always shock every new player, is they're out there in practice and they're practicing and they're doing all those things and they're running second team, and so they're used to taking all the repetitions in the second team, and then all of a sudden it gets in the ball game. And maybe for whatever reason they're just not quite ready, and so they get 2 or 3 snaps. And then you get the long faces, the next day. Well, I thought I was going to be playing more. Well, that's the other thing that they learn pretty quickly is you've got to demonstrate in practice that you're perfect. And then you get on the field. And if you're perfect with your mental assignments, you know what you're doing and all, then that's how you get on the field. If you're not at that point, then barring any injuries, you're probably not hitting the field. And so I think that there was, while our older players knew that, there's some younger players that maybe were in there, that looked up there and said, gosh, I thought I was going to be playing more. And so we had that conversation about you earned your playing time in practice. And you don't just, it's not going to be a gift on game day.
One of those newcomers, well, he's not a newcomer, but he's been around the program. We watched him at Western Maryland and talked about a huge game, Jacob Tyson. Just how he emerged in that game, and were you expecting that kind of performance from him?
Well, Jacob's always had that talent. Unfortunately, Jacob's been a little bit hampered by an injury, both in the spring and then in preseason camp. And so that limited, quite honestly, some of the snaps that he got this last week because he just really hasn't practiced that much in preseason camp. But, I think he had 13 snaps and had 2 sacks. That's pretty productive. And obviously, as I made a point of to the rest of the players and to Jacob in front of the rest of the team, is that's the way that you get more snaps. Is you take those 13 snaps and you produce on those 13 snaps. And so I'm sure that Jacob is going to get more snaps this next week because of his performance. And that's don't confuse effort with results, right? This is a results-oriented game.
Looking at what Coach Petrino said on the teleconference yesterday, when you start to redshirt freshmen with the guy that started last year, we'll get in a little bit as well. So second week with having, I guess, to go back to some high school film with the redshirt freshmen.
Right.
So how do you go about that? Is it a little bit easier this week because you had to jump through all the hoops last week to try to dig up something on Walford?
Well, no, I don't think it's necessarily any easier because you've got, whatever it is, 17 junior college players you're trying to dig up video on too. And so I think that it's probably been a little bit more difficult this week because, quite honestly, while we'd been watching Idaho video throughout the course of the summer and had an idea about kind of who they were in the past, we really thought we'd see the changes and then obviously an opportunity to look at some of these players in their first ball game. Now we're having to kind of go back and we're having to search video pretty fast, and we don't obviously have as much time. So it's probably been a little bit more difficult this week, and just because we don't know, who's out there, and then there's quite a few oars on their two deep too. It's this guy or this guy or this guy or this guy, and that makes it a little bit more difficult, obviously, from a preparation standpoint.
I didn't know until I talked to him yesterday that the Linehan, I don't know,
Lennon. Uh-huh.
But his dad is the passing game coordinator for the Cowboys.
Correct,
so
Linehan.
I guess that he has, even though this might be his first Division I snaps, it seems like he knows the game of football. What have you seen on film from him?
Not much. No, really. It's
I guess it was 2 years ago he was a senior in high school.
Exactly, and so that's difficult to see kind of what the growth rate is going to be because for most players that growth rate between their freshman year and that next year, whether they redshirt or not, is pretty dramatic. And so he was a good player coming out of high school, and I'm sure he's a better player now.
Coach, I know you're not that concerned about the history of this program, but you look at the opportunity to go 2-0 for the first time since '94. In terms of the future and the present of this program, it's certainly a golden opportunity that is ahead of you guys in this area.
It is because, and as I kind of told the players, want to be 1-0, and because we need to put Wake Forest behind us. The moment that you get trapped into looking back into the past or looking forward to the future, then you're setting yourself up for a failure today. And so we want to be 1-0 this week, but there's certainly there is an opportunity. We need to seize the opportunity to be 1-0 this week, and I think need to have. I think our effort was great the other day. We need to still play a cleaner game, and so I've challenged our players to raise the bar, so to speak, to play to our standard and to grow every week as a football player, and then thusly you grow as a football team. And so that's been the real challenge. Let's get better this week, and then let's improve our standard of performance to the point to where that allows us to have an opportunity for a win.
So I think that you prefaced this so much during the spring and leading into this season about how the defense would be so mature and be able to maybe carry the team on the offense, figure things out. How much did you see that was figured out, especially in that second half, once maybe some of the jitters came out and things started flowing a little bit better? But also, just looking at the film, what are some things that are kind of on the list about this is what we need to do to be able to get to that point where we also have a very mature group and can do our share in carrying the team as well?
Right. I'm very, very excited about our defensive performance. That did not surprise me at all. I knew going in. I think that from a defensive perspective, you had all the ingredients are together in relation to having good players, having guys that have grown up in a system, and having maturity along those lines to where they're not going to make young mistakes. And that's, it didn't surprise me. I think that the defense for both teams were the strength of their teams going in. And, knew that about Wake Forest's defense also, that was going to be the strength of their team. And I think that kind of proved to be true. I think offensively, we were very, very conservative in the first half, and to allow us to kind of get everybody to have that opportunity, kind of get that, as you mentioned, kind of the first game jitters out, but also just for some of these guys to I knew we could play to our defensive strength. I knew that going into the game. And so there wasn't a whole lot of reason to be really, really aggressive. Let's just make sure that we're playing field position. Special teams turned out to be big, right? Turnovers and penalties. Those things are big. The other thing is field position in a first ball game. And we played a field position game with them, and we ended up winning the field position when it was all said and done. But we were playing to our strength of our defense. There's no question about it. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that we have a better idea about where we're headed. We ran the ball, and we ran the ball relatively effectively. And then once it started kind of dying out in the second half, we started play action, and the play actions were good for us and let us down for a couple of drives. I'd like to see more consistency out of the offense, and we didn't get that. And we did have some mental errors, some guys that were sabotaging some plays. We'll grow, we'll get better because of that last experience. We'll learn from it. And if they don't learn from it, then they don't play, and that's just kind of the way that it is. It's we'll go back and fix those things that were problems, and then if they continue to pop up again, then we need to start looking in some other directions.
Mm-hmm. You talked about last week about Pete and being a relationship type of guy, and then after the game saying that he had a lot of pressure on him, but seeing him in a live ball game for the first time, not so much on the field but on the sideline, he's probably battling with his own stuff inside, but did you still see that relationship type of him come out and wanting to go over to other guys and being like, okay, if they happen to be the saboteur on a certain play, going over and talking with them and just trying.
Yeah, I think there was a calmness and a poise with him. Yeah. I think that in his mind he was still trying to figure out. So this is kind of what ULM's all about. Because every player kind of goes through that too a little bit. This was his first ULM game. It wasn't just his first game with this team. It was his first ULM game. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what is the claw, and why are they playing that Indian song? With the claw going up and down. And there's a lot of things that if you don't know any of the past history or tradition of the place, then you don't understand any of it. All those things were new to him, and so I think he was kind of soaking some of those things in a little bit also, and. But Pete's got a great work ethic, and he's bright, and I think he's excited about this next week.
Well, Matt, and kind of coming back after the block punt, you talk about field position, and he pinned him back so many times, but him having to kind of get that out of his mind and bounce back
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think that Justin Manton had a superb game in terms of field position. And obviously the block punt was not on him. It was on a new player out there that didn't actually do exactly what we'd like for him to do. And that's, again, part of us learning from those experiences. But that goes back to, again, about it's so important to have maturity on your team, because mature players, they shake those things off. They recognize that they've got a job to do on the very, very next snap, and they don't let a pass snap interfere with the next snap. Justin did just a great job of that, and really pleased with his performance.
Okay, last question about the quarterbacks.
Okay, no.
With Coach Petrino yesterday saying that both those guys will play, I saw one time where Pete was on the field and Braley ran in for a play. And I know you did a lot of that with Colton and Cody Wells whenever they were both here. We also talked about how you like doing the two quarterback thing, not so much just the trickery, but just getting two quarterbacks in. Do you see that being something that you would do again this year with completely different guys, with both Colton and Cody going?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that was like the
And they were both
longest
they were
question, and then it was the shortest answer.
well, no,
But
they were both on the field, as you mentioned. That's something that we've always done. I have we put Braley in that position because quite honestly, Braley was an all-state receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Coming out of high school, and and Braley knows the offense extremely well. And if you might have also noticed, Braley played about every position on the field the other day other than the offensive line. He went in for multiple different people, and that creates some problems too, obviously, whenever you have that ability. Mm-hmm. Now, we need to see him catch the ball better than what he caught it the other day. Mm-hmm. But, again, that's just we need to be more functional.
I think like when Cody was a senior, maybe a junior, he might take in the second series and just be the only quarterback on the field.
Correct.
Do you also see some of that maybe playing out?
I do. I think that at some point in time, I think it was a little bit different in relation at that point in time with Cody and Colton because Cody had some experiences and Colton had quite a few snaps. I wanted Pete to get every snap that he could get here the other day. And so normally we do. We play, and we'll give that backup quarterback a series. And I do want to do that. It wasn't in the plan this last week just because of the nature of knowing that we were going to need to give Pete all those snaps. And Chaz, has played here before. And so, Chaz isn't going to – he understands everything in relation to not just the offense, but he's played before, as has Braley. And so I'm not too concerned about making sure that another guy gets experience because that both those guys have some.
We saw how Centurious kind of wore them down at the end of the game. I see 26 carries for the game, a career high for him. Is that what you kind of anticipate out of him, being a workhorse and getting stronger as the game goes on like that?
Yeah, I was excited to see that number of carries because obviously that's something that we haven't attempted with him because of his past injuries. And so, yeah, it was exciting for him to get it. I think he felt good afterwards. I think that there was a little don't get me wrong when I say this, but I think you'll get the gist of what I'm saying, is I think that anytime that you clear one of those plateaus, you clear a hurdle, there's a confidence that kind of comes along with it. And, for him to have that many carries, it's not that there was something that he'd set out there that he had to break through, but it's just, again, it's one of those plateaus that, okay, well, I can carry this many snaps and still be functional by the end of the game. And so that was good to see, and I did appreciated the run-pass balance that we had this last week. That's something that I think is going to be significant moving forward for us.
So in the 5 years you've been here, you faced a Petrino every year but one in 2011 because of Arkansas, and then in 2012, it was pretty much still his offense, and Paul Petrino was still on the staff. And so when you're looking at film of Idaho in the 1 year that Paul's been there, do you see a lot of the Bobby Petrino type of offenses that he had at Western Kentucky last year?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, certainly last year there was, significant amount of what we'd seen at Arkansas, whenever they were at Arkansas together. And so you're seeing a pro-oriented offense, the occasional one back, like to use the tight ends, movement of the fullback. But there's also this Chris Sinkovich, who, and you raised your eyebrows like, how do I spell that?
Oh, yeah. That's
Cinkov. Coach Sinkovich and I worked together at UNLV, and he's the offensive coordinator there. And so, whenever I turned on the video from last year, you see a significant amount of kind of what we did at UNLV out there too. That's not kind of a Paul Petrino, Bobby Petrino type of thing. It was, there's the empty and a lot of the exact same calls, and so there's this Arkansas influence, and then there's a little bit of, I think, Coach Sinkovich putting his mark on the offense also.
So can you comment on whether, or do we have to wait until Thursday on whether you think that Rashawn, probable for this week, a gauge of how many weeks? Or?
Yeah, on Thursday, then we'll make those notifications. And I apologize for it. We're just, you know how I am. I'm kind of a rule guy, and and so the NCAA came out, and rightfully so, I think, because I think there has never been a best practices policy. Here's how we should do things from a collegiate model, and this doesn't just go for injuries. There's a best practices policy now for concussion management, okay, and for our practices in relation to not having back-to-back full contact days. And it's not a mandatory thing by the NCAA. These are just shown to be the best practices by all universities, okay, that have gone through enough of it based off the studies that are out there. And so there are several things that are falling into this best practices thought process this year, this being one of them, that we need to have some consistency in relation to information and how we're releasing information, both from a HEPA standpoint to, from a protectionary standpoint, litigation, all those other kinds of things. Obviously, all these things move things in different directions. That's why we're dealing with this right now. Is it's moved in this direction enough to where, as college entities, we need to have a best practices policy in place so that everybody knows this is how we're going to do things. Now, I don't know that everybody's going to do it. Matter of fact, I've already heard an SEC coach come out right after the game and say, yeah, this guy's hurt. He's probably out for 4 months, that kind of thing. And but we're going to go ahead and try to stick to that, and knowing that's kind of what they would like to see us do. So I'll give you something on Thursday, basically, doubtful, probable, out, that type of thing, very NFL-ish.
Yeah.
This is the NFL model, obviously.
Okay. I wasn't sure anyway if you break the rules. I didn't know the NFL rules, so.
No,
I didn't know how that exactly worked, but. Okay, so with the defense and talking about the maturity of them, do you or any of the defensive staff have to talk them down or something to keep them humble because of all the pats on the back that they're getting and 5 first downs the whole game, or do you feel like that they have so much maturity that it's not one of those things you really have to address?
No, I think that you always address things in relation to. I want to pat our guys on the back, but I know we can't push ourselves ahead by patting ourselves on the back either. And we have, I think, a very, very good defensive football team that could be an outstanding defensive football team if that's what their desire is. And I think that, again, it's where do you set the bar. I don't think that I think we're capable of playing better than what we played the other night on defense. And that needs to be what needs to be the bar set, rather than some 5 first downs or this many points, or any of those imaginary numbers just set you up. That's why you don't see anywhere in our facility, any place, any kind of goal board that says, hey, if I hit this mark, then I win. Mm-hmm. Well, no, you don't. What you do is you try to better yourself each and every week, and then you win. And so, like I said, I'm very pleased with the defense. I have patted them on the back, but I've also reached out to the challenge of we can be better. They know that we can be better than what we showed the other day. And I think they recognize, too, that Wake Forest had some offensive difficulties that they were having to deal with that Idaho, potentially is not. A freshman center, a freshman quarterback, true freshman. You're not going to run into that in college football very often. And that helped our cause, too. Now, I'm not saying that we didn't play well, because we did. Okay, and we played against a bunch of other guys that had played some college football before. But I do think that this defense recognizes that they can be a special group, but that's only going to be decided at the end of the year whether they're a special group. If they think they're special right now, then again they're setting themselves up.
I noticed that with your captains, we've already touched on some Terrace, but Mitch Lane was voted captain this
Right.
week. And kind of along the same lines as the last question is, Mitch has said, okay, I had a great redshirt freshman year, and I believe I did, and maybe my sophomore year last year might have gotten a little, I don't know, arrogant or complacent or think that I've arrived.
Right.
And so for him to start out this year and kind of have that same hunger, I guess, from his freshman year, do you also notice that he's sort of back to, knowing that every day I have to prove myself and I'm not a superstar just yet?
Yeah, no, I think that again comes kind of with maturity. That's the difficulties with playing younger players or having a young team is sometimes we've had in the past is you run into these issues sometimes. I think that as you look back at Colton's sophomore year, Colton didn't have a great sophomore year and had something kind of come out and prove his junior year. And I think that we all self-satisfaction can hinder us just as much as anything, and when you think that you've arrived, then you haven't. And, I challenge our players as they know that, you need to get up every day and win the day. And the moment that you get up in the morning, you think you've already won the day, you're getting ready to have a bad day. You better get up every morning with the idea you're going to win the day. And because you're right, there's that arrival mentality. Now, I'm not saying Mitch got to that, but I think that Mitch desired to have a better year than what he had last year, and that's been a driving force for him, and thusly, because of that, his work ethic, his attention to detail, his ability to communicate within the rest of the defense structure, because he's a very intelligent player also, I think allows for everybody else to raise their level too. So excited about what I saw out of Mitch, but that's not surprising to me.
I was waiting on that because I had a side note question.
Okay.
I just want to make sure everybody was done with talking about game stuff. But, with the 53-man roster in the NFL being
Right.
limited this week, the fact that Josh Allen was kept by Tampa Bay after going as a free agent and proving himself.
And actually, he wasn't.
Oh, they said he was.
Well, he was.
Okay, he was.
He was, and then Sunday morning, they let him go.
Oh, okay.
And he is now with the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, okay. Well,
So, it was kind of part of the business side. He called and, he was upset because obviously you have this deadline about being able to announce your 53, and then there's this other part, this little window of opportunity to where somebody else can pick you up. Well, they'd missed that opportunity for anybody else to pick him up, and so it was kind of like, hey, here you let me go, but you didn't give me a chance to go someplace else. Well, at that level, guess what? Nobody really cares, and that's what's sad about that level. That's whenever I was my brief stint in pro ball, I mean, just this mentality that nobody matters other than just the business side of the team. That just drove me crazy. I did, and that's why I've never, I've had opportunities to go to the NFL. I've never had that desire to go because I had that real short time frame when it ruined me on that business side of things. So Josh got a quick wake up along those lines, but he's now with Green Bay, and good for him. Good young man, works hard, and love him to death.
maybe I have to trade him his Florida swim trunks and flip-flops for some serious heavy
Well,
weather.
actually, that's whenever I was at home last night when I got the text late last night, and my wife said, "Wow, he's going to have to trade in his swim trunks for a down jacket," and that is actually probably pretty true, and it will happen pretty quickly up there, having lived up there before.